Okay, we should be live. I hope everyone can hear me well. I can't really tell. I did a quick test before I went live, but today we're talking about trust. It's exciting. Trust is a tough one, isn't it? But we're going to talk about the different layers of trust. Really try to delve into what trust means in its foundation, because it's a really useful tool for us also for a self-exploration when we start to consider how we trust and what we're going to trust in our world. And so typically, we're going to start with sort of the human level of trust and like trusting relationships and trusting things like that, or not, right? Trusting people or not trusting people. Basically, like trying to find ourselves in a comfortable place where we understand the world around us a little bit better, and get to a place where we can feel that we can be ourselves authentically around people, and this allows us to feel safe, right? We can be safe and authentically ourselves with people. That tends to be when we feel we can trust them. It tends to be that type of thing that brings us to that. So at the human level, it's really interesting for us to look at where we lack trust and where we lack faith. So essentially, the way that we've built up our trust or lack of trust is through our cellular memory, in fact, and our thought patterning as well. So essentially, we've picked up trust woundings from everyone around us. We've picked these up in different ways. So some of them are things that people have done directly to us, directly sort of like engaged us in these maybe hurtful ways, abusive even ways. But then there's also demonstrations of lack of trust that we observe as children and things like that then we take on too. We start to learn that like, oh, we just can't trust people to be this certain way because our dad always said something about how people are always going to screw you over or something, right? So we start to notice that we have this lack of trust for just people in general because of this saying, perhaps. It could be things like that. But it's also that we are shown an incongruence usually. And many of us were quite aware when we were younger that this incongruent behavior, and what I mean by incongruent is like people tend to be on your side until they're not, until they're on their own side, right? And when they're on their own side, they start to do and say things that may be completely inconsiderate of you and inconsiderate of your feelings, inconsiderate of really everything. And they do so in this way that seems obvious to us that they probably shouldn't do that. Like, so they're acting incongruent. They love us, they're our friends, they're great, and then the next something happens, they get upset with us and they lash out. And because our consciousness itself, in truth, is only really present, it doesn't really actually, the soul wounding that can come up doesn't actually really understand time at all. So it's like this person accepts me, now they don't. Right? So it's like all of a sudden the soul's like, whoa, I haven't been accepted. It's almost erases the experience of the other acceptance. It makes it more palpable for us that no, they didn't accept me this time. And if we look at our own experience, we can see that we do this too, to some degree or another. Whenever we get fearful in any way, we almost always act entirely selfishly. When we can extend this to our immediate family and like our dearest loved ones, like our children as well, because we consider them aspects of us. So we'll seek to protect them with the same type of instinctual drive. And we tend to lash out at people or act in a way that has side effects on others, consequences, if you will. Fear creations always have consequences of some kind. You're usually either harming someone inadvertently, perhaps, or harming yourself, self-sabotaging. It's always something like that when we're making decisions out of fear. And that's why trust is such an important topic, because what we don't trust shows us where we fear. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. But, at the human level, we want to try to recognize our patterns of distrust, really, because we want to be an advocate for trusting harmony between people, right? We also want to feel capable to be open to others. Otherwise, we're not going to have any of the connections with people that we desire. We're not going to be able to bring those in because we think everyone is not trustworthy. And so we're just going to basically see a whole bunch of untrustworthy people. And this is kind of a challenging trick. But we're meant to notice that the challenge of our trusting them comes from these patterned responses and these other times we've been hurt, that we end up like, someone might do a similar type of habitual thing that might show that to us that when this person is like, this person isn't always very thankful of things, and somebody that isn't very grateful of life maybe isn't trustworthy, because I had this friend who was really ungrateful all the time, and then they went and did this. And like we end up projecting all of this assumption. And very well, we could be correct, right? Like we could be. But we still want to notice we have these presumptions, and where are these coming from, and are they actually like real? Because usually they're not. Usually they're just sort of patterned, conditioned sort of responses that the mind's going, oh, I know what's happening here. Again, I know this. We've done this before. But the mind is insane that way. It doesn't know anything that way. It just likes to guess, basically. But it guesses in such a confident way that's like, oh, I absolutely know what's happening right now. Look how ungrateful that person is. They're going to be the exact same as this other person. And we do that with our patterns. So it's not necessarily an issue. Like if being around people that are ungrateful as well is like challenging for us, then it's not really an issue about whether or not we trust them. We don't really vibe with them, so we probably won't maintain close contact anyway, right? Or be intimate. Like even if we have to be close with them because maybe they're family or something, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're intimately close with these people, right? There can be this drive to like be intimately close with everyone that we're connected with as well. And that, especially the further we awaken and have more depth to us, the less palpable some of that depth we have is to other people. And we have to notice that, sort of, right? Like, so we're kind of a handful while we're in our awakening. Like, we're a bit of a handful. We're a bit much. We're a bit sensitive. I like to call us sensitive Sallys. We're and I don't mean that in like a gender way. It's just a funny alliteration. But we can call them sensitive Sams or something. But we're all basically these sensitive children, and we are starting to really unlock the imagination better, or perhaps come more into it, become more intimate with ourselves and our inner child, and we start to get more effulgent and giving of our heart and our purity, whatever that is. And that weirds people out a lot of times. It weirds people out. I would say more times than not, people find it a little unsettling at first. Most of the people that have a long-standing relationship with you, it's sort of like you've come out of the closet in a way, like in a sense of the word. Like you had this secret, oh, I'm a spiritual being, I'm a spirit having a human experience, and then you're like popped out and you're like, hey guys, reality isn't real, right? Like we get all excited and we say these things to people, and they don't have any clue how to handle that. And then we start to distrust people more because we don't get accepted in our new authentic self that we know to be true. So we build on this wounding and like reaffirming that these types of things mean we shouldn't trust people, things like that. I actually think for myself at least, and I'm still trying to explore this. So, I'm not saying this is the way I would necessarily say people should go, but at a certain point, for me, it became obvious that the other human, will do whatever it is they're going to do. Trusting them or not is not very relevant to anything at the core of it, right? I don't know what they're going to do. Either I can presume optimistically that they'll do well by me and others. I can just presume that. But if I have evidence to show me that that's not probably going to happen, then I can take whatever steps I need to get out of this situation. So it's not really anything to do with trust. It's just I can see their intentions, right? We can notice if we get really in touch with ourselves, we can tell like what's happening. We can see when people are trying to put weird commitments on us that we're not into, and we can get a sense of what they're doing, what they're attempting to do. It becomes very clear. So trusting isn't so much of an issue, but paradoxically, this capacity to really see what people are doing that clearly means we can't be emotionally invested in what they're doing. We can't be wrapped up in fear, because the mind then makes up stuff. Instead of seeing truly, we just make up a bunch of stuff. Nonsense, really. So it's by trusting the universe in ourselves, which I'll move into in a minute, but it's about trusting ourselves and our centeredness beyond whatever's happening here. That brings the clarity into the moment where trust is not really a thing. You can see what's happening. So it's like either I'm into this or I'm not into this, right? Really. Or I'm impartial and whatever you're doing is whatever. It's really those types of situations, generally speaking. But because we still have these trust triggers, I might call them, or areas that we might avoid people or avoid situations because we just don't really trust it, that can be learning for us to notice, oh, I have this like pattern of not trusting here because I'm afraid that this and this might happen. So really, we can trust in the wisdom that we've seen some of these behaviors. We can trust that there's a wisdom in us around these situations now, these similar situations. We don't have to be taken advantage of. We don't have to be tricked. We're not going to be tricked if our eyes are open, like our eyes open, right? If we're seeing things more truly, we're not going to be deceived by anything. When we know ourselves as the truth of what we are, a divine being, multidimensional, infinite in nature, eternal, then it doesn't so much matter whether or not this person adheres to their commitment or not, of whatever it is. Like it is what it is. Whatever they're willing to do, they'll do it. And thy will shall be done. What they will be done. They'll go do what they will, right? We can certainly have our opinions on how they act if we want to, but opinions they're going to clutter us up. They don't really serve too much of a purpose unless they're like interesting thoughts. Like inspired opinions are very fun, I think. Like, noticing symbolism and how this symbolism connects with that symbolism and that type of thing is very interesting thought-based discovery. But an opinion on how another is being, humans are being so many ways. Isn't it tiring? Isn't it like a little bit tiring to worry about who's being what way and whether or not it's good? Or, there's an importance to that because we need to observe basically what we're doing in this without usually realizing it is we're observing in others things we do not want to show up as and things we do want to show up as. Like we're taking sort of mentors or like, what's the word? Role models for goodness that we resonate with, and we're having sort of anti-role models for things that we don't resonate with. That's sort of what we're doing as souls when we're like looking around and engaging with people. The problem is that we get outspoken about it and we think that is all like real, that the archetypal expressions from others are somehow something to do with who they are as a being. The two things could not be really further from each other, honestly. What they are as a being is an infinite intelligence of all things, and what they're doing is just quite simply an insane thing in separation. Even in this moment now, the hypocrisy going on here of people talking with each other and hearing words from each other is not truly like a sane concept to the spirit, which is why there's this merging and melding of the you could say this Kundalini, or the wisdom of the serpent, with the knowing of spirit, the love of spirit, the truth of spirit. But the serpent, sort of the being self, the vehicle self, the mind body spirit complex, or the soul, has to learn how to be wise, basically, how to notice patterns in things, and how to think about some things in the mind in a way that's not clouded up by fear. So there's purposeful learning that happens on the human level, and then that's more autonomous stuff, just really like survival based stuff. But because many of us are unconscious here, the autonomous survival based stuff is just like looping, and it's not like real. They're just in dreamlands, basically. And it's not sad even, really. It's just it is where they're at as a soul, you could say. And many people call these people NPCs and stuff. That's not the case. It can feel like that, it can seem like that, but that's not the case. I think I've talked about this before, but thought forms that are under like a sentient type of control like that require a lot of investment from a fifth density being. We're not creating fake beings running all over the place like that. There's usually what's happened is something like, you might hear of the Men in Black, for example. These beings are manifested through thought, and then they're manipulated to go do the thing, and then they disappear, basically. And they show up in different ways, and sometimes they deliver really interesting, weird, dark stuff to their wake. But basically saying that someone's an NPC is essentially claiming that that's what they are. And the consciousness or the social memory complexes that are invested in this sphere in trying to manipulate aren't able to produce that type of mass manifest of like a synthetic type of thought form. It's not synthetic, it's biosynthetic, I guess you could say, but it's thought based. But it can't be like invested with a spirit, so it's like a robot, basically, a thought robot. And it can look and feel exactly like a human, but it can also dematerialize and stuff. So you couldn't like wrestle it or anything. They talk about it in the Law of One, if you're interested. They talk about it a little bit. Don starts to ask, like, could I like grapple with it and lock it in a closet? The guy, the courage on the balls on that guy. Try to wrestle with one of these things. I would want to try and capture one too. That's funny. But I'm not sure why I went on that tangent. Somebody's probably been researching or reading something like that about that recently, so it's probably relevant for some of you. And maybe I'll do a video on that whole structure of control and what the Gnostics tend to refer to as archons and the demiurge and stuff. If you guys are interested, let me know in the comments or in the chat if you guys are interested in that topic about these control paradigms and how they work. And it's essentially a virus in the sphere, sort of. It's kind of how it works. So it's a really interesting topic, but it comes back. It helps us with trust, actually. So it'll actually loop back into trust. But the next level of trust is just trusting in the divine, like the divine self, as God, as the creator. It is obviously the best thing for anything to ever put their trust in, right? What else could we possibly trust in if not that? what else could possibly never let us down but our self, our true self, not the self we pretend to be when we're humaning, but the true self, the true spark of us, is the only thing that is actually real about us. And even that realness of it is an illusion of separation. So it's, but it is much, 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 much significantly more real. It's true because it's light. When we're in matter here, we're in dense, low vibrational matter, which is an illusion formed by the womb of the mother. The Egyptians talked about this a lot. And it's all like a membrane or a a membrane or a skin is a good way to see the reality. The skin of consciousness, and so we only really see with our eyeballs the skin, touch the skin. And it's a big mistake we tend to make to not see the light underneath the skin. We don't tend to be able to see it, and we're basically told by society and each other almost all the time that it's not there, because we're all terrified of the light. Honestly, people think they're scared of shadow and stuff, but they're not. They're actually scared of embracing who they truly are, because then they have to embody a Christ-like figure. They have to recognize what they are in truth, which seems like just a completely tall order, an impossible pedestal thing that has been constructed by societal hierarchical type paradigms. It's the most natural state in the world to just be in the state of I am all that is. That's the natural state that we forgot here. We knew it at a time. There was a time we knew it. In Lemuria, we knew that. And we also knew that to a degree in Atlantis. And what we're seeing now is basically the third attempt at properly awakening. So in Lemuria, we were very loving and naive, trusted everything enough to basically get totally invested into the illusion, become manipulated and manipulatable with confusion of what is real and what's not real, losing the innocence. But through no fault of that society's own, it went underwater. But just as it was all going underwater, these souls basically became all invested in the sphere and in traversing this fall from grace that they began back then, accidentally, just innocently, just, that's as far as I remember what happened. And then in Atlantis, it was sort of the opposite. It was a technological, mind-based thing, still heart-based, like still spiritual, but just very masculine. Although it was primarily ran by women. It was more of a matriarchy, I think is the word. Yeah, that's probably the word. But it was more like that. The priestesses were the most respected people, basically. But we started to clone things and do all these other things. So the reason I'm talking about all this is because we're trying to learn a balance, comfort of technology, like how that can actually assist in our day-to-day technology or comfort and our cool things we can do with each other. There's a lot of cool things that we can do with technology that are like interesting and fun to play with in the reality. But we tend to weaponize things, which is why we don't really get technology from galactic forces really anymore. Not new stuff. They gave us stuff already and we weaponized it, and then they gave us other stuff that's benign, or not benign, but benevolent, and we haven't given it out. Our governments have held on to it in secret because it would disturb the economy and stuff. So I just wanted to say, if you guys have any questions, anything in the chat, feel free to leave them. I'm just going to finish up some of the things I'm talking about here. And who knows where it's going to go, but I'll get to the chat soon. and I appreciate you spending a few moments of your time with me. When we start to more envelop ourselves in a divine trust, like a trust like there couldn't possibly be anything against me because God's on my side. Like routinely now, honestly, I hear, and whenever I'm questioning myself, I feel this presence, and I can feel, not with words, but I can feel they're saying, like God is saying, you're my child and I'm well pleased with you. Be still. Like just be still. If I get perturbed, it's almost like literally I almost lose control of the body for a minute, and I just fall into this presence. I don't even do anything. It's the weirdest thing. It's like I've somehow conditioned myself to notice fear impulses, and I start to just fall into this. Like I don't know how to describe it. I'm gonna try and figure out what I've done. Not what I've done, maybe what God's done. But it's really great because at the same time, there's a part of me that wonders about bypassing. Am I not noticing things that I can learn here? Or is it more simply that my spirit just isn't interested in this learning? I think that's more likely the case, that my soul is just not interested in experiencing any trauma. So it just detaches. It just goes, nope, this is not real. And it just falls into that I am nothing state. And it's like automatic. It happens to me just randomly now when people are being weird around me. They just fall right into it. And like I said, it's purely automatic. And hopefully I can help teach it because it's, I can figure out how I did it or how I managed to make it come about or help it come about with God's aid, of course, but because it's sort of a superpower, honestly. And I think most people would assume that you get to that through meditation, but not really. Like I don't meditate too much the way people would presume. I do my own sort of meditative, contemplative stuff, and a lot of you would probably resonate with having ADHD or attention deficit. I don't like to call it ADHD with the disorder, but it's attention deficit hyperactivity in the mind. I don't think it's a disorder at all. I think it's just a little bit challenging for the society to deal with you. It's also a little bit challenging for you to deal with society. And it's a little challenging for you to deal with your thoughts, our thoughts. And I understand it very much. I have that. I have that experience and have my whole life. Luckily for me, I didn't get put on medication, but I think that tends to do more harm than good. Just based on what I've seen. I'm not a doctor, of course. I don't know why I'm talking about all that. It's so funny where things go. I have no idea what I'm going to say ever, and it just goes wherever. But I guess let's talk about trust, how it shows your fear, right? So, for example, like if you know that you have trouble trusting romantic partners, for example, this was something that I had trouble with. So I'll use this as an example. I used to have a lot of trouble trusting that the partner who claims to want to be with me does in fact want to be with me. Even that was hard for me to believe my whole life. And even my most recent relationship with Tassel, I found myself often wondering if this could possibly be like if it's true, is this real? Like I can trust that she enjoys me. Like there were still parts of me that would pipe in with this. Now, of course, I wasn't listening to those parts, but they were still running, is what I mean. We can notice that there's this like connection between where we need or feel a need to trust and what happened in the past to cause us to feel that someone could harm us through, like, so for example, women cheating on me. Like I had this girlfriend once. What a weird situation. She was having many sort of mental health type issues, and would sort of routinely just cheat on me. She'd just have sex with other guys. And then I'd be like, I'd cry and I'd be heartbroken and I'd forgive her. and I'd stay with her. And then she stopped telling me about it, but other people would keep telling me and I still wouldn't leave. And, you know, part of me is like, good for you for like just loving this person and forgiving, even at that young of an age as 15 or something. Good for you. But man, what was that about, right? It shows sort of self-value and like that type of thing as well. But it showed me that basically I learned from this one woman, or girl at the time, teenager, but she was older than me, but I learned that I can't trust women to like actually not sleep with other men. Like, because this one would constantly say she's not going to. And so this program like got kind of embedded in me quickly. And even if I didn't presume that they would cheat on me or something, and I also want to say my idea of what is cheating has even shifted a lot. Like, these are sort of old paradigms that I'm talking about. Cheating on someone, it's a weird vibe to it. It's like the concept itself that you have ownership over them and they're not allowed to go do something like it. But if you both commit that you're not going to do that, then you should honor your commitments, right? So I guess that's what it's about, really, is that women didn't seem to honor their commitment to not do that. And from there, I anticipate that if another woman is doing this or may do this, like, I have to anticipate and be okay with that already. Like, that was my route, was like, I would just assume they're going to do it so that the discomfort of them when they actually go and do it is less. But I realized this was creating this stress in me as well. I thought it was a wise approach to it, right? My wise self. I know what they'll do, so I'll just pretend they've already done it. I'll imagine it almost. I'll pretend they've done it, so then it doesn't hurt me. And it's an interesting way to do it, and it does really sort of work. But it also makes you feel like it's done. Like, it makes you feel like you can't trust, you can't connect, you can't really open up as much because you're operating with this weird block up that you've created consciously to try and protect yourself from this fear. So, in myself, I don't really trust that women will actually stay committed to what they say about me as far as whatever they commit to. And I still it has not been my experience. That hasn't been my experience. My experience has been that people tell me one thing and then they do other things. Almost all of them. So I learned for me that I guess trusting in human behavior itself, like in the doing and speaking and how they show up, trusting in that probably isn't the greatest idea. Who knows where they're gonna go to next? We don't know. And it doesn't help us to do a sort of preliminary judgment on where they might be going with something to hurt us. And, we're not really creating useful mind chatter there. What we're just sort of doing is spinning up drama in our mind about this potential threat that isn't really a threat at all. If they do decide to be with other people, that's great for them. It's also great for us, because if they did that when we thought we were committed, then we have dodged a bullet, right? Thank God that we noted that they did this now before further commitment occurred. And if lots of stuff has already been committed to, it's harder and harder, right? So the earlier we can see like behaviors that are hurtful, that cause us to not really feel trust, the better we are off with it. But I would say that the framing of trust changes, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but the framing of trust changes. You're just trusting that you can tell what's going on. You're trusting in yourself Don't put your trust in other people, really. But try to trust in the goodness of humans as well. We want to be able to build up this idea in ourselves that people are good. Inherently in their core, they're good. The soul is good. The spirit is great. They're all great. Everyone's pretty confused. Everyone, including myself. If we weren't confused, we would not exist here. Plain and simple. And so just as I like make mistakes and do things, so do other people. There are things that I accidentally didn't do that I had committed to that I just like forgot or something. You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and these types of things where I've like committed to something and totally slipped my mind. It's because the soul's not committing. The mind's just communicating a commitment. But commitments are essentially soul contracts. And, you know, if, like, if we're making a commitment to another soul and our heart isn't into it, the mind has to manage it. And if the mind doesn't really have ownership over agency, over the reality, if the ego's stepped aside a bit, you're not going to find that you end up following the mind's suggestions really as much. So you end up like forgetting about commitments the mind's just made to make things easy. Essentially, the mind's just fibbed, right? The mind's just, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll get myself involved in this thing. And it doesn't want to. Like the soul doesn't want to. So that happens. And when the soul wants to, you commit, and then it's almost like no matter what you do, you're going to remember, you're going to feel it. Like you can still choose to abandon the commitment and things like that. But these contracts are established when the heart agrees with whatever's been, you know, suggested. So if you're curious about that, that's what I've discovered about it anyway, is the heart's into it or it's not. The heart's like yes or it's like no. When the heart says no, we can still do the thing, but the mind has to like get us to go do it, whereas the heart sort of just inspires us to do it automatically almost, depending on how in coherence we are really, right? Heart-mind coherence is the way to look at that. So when we're in coherence, we actually are letting the heart lead us blindly. Coherence is not a perfectly balanced state. The heart is just a small blip over the mind's power, you could say, over the agency of the matter, of the material or physical expression of the vehicle. At least this is my recommended calibration, you could say. If we follow the mind, we're going to go to bad places because the mind doesn't know. It just claims it, which I say all the time, but it doesn't. The heart does know. The heart knows the way. So the mind will sometimes pretend to be the heart as well. The mind is tricky and a liar. The biggest liar we have is our mind, just constantly making shit up. Constantly making stuff up. So I guess I'll just start here. The last thing I wanted to talk about was in the book of Matthew, Jesus says, be wary as serpents. What does he say? He says, be wary as serpents. Yeah, be wary as serpents and harmless as doves. Basically, he's talking about something that's really, really important. You know, he often said these like simplistic type phrases that are just hugely like ripe with metaphysical understanding and spiritual knowledge. Like even these sentences are, some of them are bananas. This one in particular is talking about the Kundalini Serpent and the human experience and the wisdom garnered from the experience, as well as the wisdom from the truth of the spirit itself, the dove, right? The dove, the Holy Spirit. the peace of God, really, is what that energy is. So that energy has to supplicate and tame the Kundalini Serpent that we are. It has to learn. I'm in a new place also. I'm sure you guys noticed, but this is my new apartment. Ta-da! Ta-da! It's a little echoey. I'm probably going to put up some acoustic pads and stuff, but it's the Kundalini Serpent that is where we like collect our wisdom, our experience from, to then create gnosis, turn that experience and knowledge into wisdom. So that Kundalini aspect of us feeds on the environment and feeds on all experience, and then garners its wisdom from that. You could think of it as a literal entity that grows within us that feeds on our experience that way. And it includes the cells. The Kundalini essentially like powers all the physical illusion of us, and it also is what draws all experience to us. It's it's really the manifestation of the physical vessel entirely can be represented in the Kundalini. Now, of course, it also represents the other energetic bodies that we don't really see. So it represents kind of all of it. So to be wise as serpents means like you've seen how people are. Like you see how people are and how they can be. So you walk knowing people will do whatever they're doing. And you know that sometimes they're going to go against you. You'll begin to see their intentions prior to their actions. When you have these states of trust and clarity and no fear, you begin to see clearly, which shows you what people are doing. You can see the prophet can see what's happening. They see the intention forming, you could say. The akash of what's about to happen is being writ by the person that you're interacting with, and you begin to notice what they're doing and what they're going to do next. And so it becomes nothing to just say what they're about to do. You don't have to say it, but internally you're like, okay, this person is going to seek to betray me here. Interesting. Now the question is, do we follow that knowing or not? Are we scared of this? If we're scared of this occurring, there's confusion happening. Probably the ego tricking us. And probably this is not an intuitive understanding. This is probably just an illusion of the mind. If we are upset about what we've discovered, we know it's clear when it doesn't upset us. That's when it's clear. The intuition will not upset us when it's clear. It will just be obvious that this is what's going on. Now, that's the best way that I can discern, because it's challenging to notice. Because we can presume, because we see patterns so easily as well. We don't want to be recognizing patterns. That's great for analyzing the past a bit and like noticing trends of things, and it's an interesting thought. But patterns, people are random. People are unique and random. The patterns don't apply because they don't fit in the boxes. They will never adhere to your patterns that you prescribe for them, which is one of the reasons we struggle to trust, is because we assume certain patterns and then they navigate out of the pattern in some way, and that turns our reality upside down. We're like, what are they doing? Excuse me. But it's all patterning, right? When we're seeing it from our intuition, it's more of just I know what's happening. And there's not much of a question about it. The question now is just, am I able to take some presence here and ask God for how to handle this in the most loving way that I can find to move through this? I see what's happening. And in the past, I've been able to see this very clearly, but not properly stepped out of the mind to let the heart guide me and let God guide me in the right direction. So then I try to solve it from the mind and just create more problems. The mind makes up problems, and then we get wrapped into it, and then next thing you know, there's a problem that never existed. That's how it works with our ego games with each other. We both parties just make shit up and then get involved with it, but none of that is even like happening. It's not even real. They're just playing this sort of psycho babble with each other, this back and forth of illusion. Oh, it's not real. I know people think it's real, and it feels real to us as well many times, right? It feels very real. So I'm not denying the feelings, and we don't want to deny our feelings or pretend they're not there, but we do want to notice that like our feelings are not great indicators of what is true. Right? We can hear truth and it can feel quite bad. So our feelings aren't indicators of truth that way. When our feelings are bad, it's indicating to us that we are lying to ourselves about something, probably about the truth we might have just heard. Because there's truth in every offering. There's always truth there, always light in something. We just aren't seeing the truth of the matter. It's always truth with a massive dose of falsity or not, right? But it's just varying levels of truth. That's what is real. So yeah, I think that's a good place for me to jump into the chat. Hi Max. Oh, I think you're talking about the archons and stuff. He said definitely interested. And Star of Amun-Ra. Amun-Ra. Ooh, I know that name. Trusting ourselves is harder than trusting others. Trust we will be okay if someone betrays us. Yeah. I think there's no one to really trust but God, right? Like, think about it this way. Like, if you have a dog and you give it food and it arches its back a bit and gets defensive a bit when you get near it, while it's eating, it's obvious that the dog is afraid you're going to try and take its food. Is it wise for us to reach our hand towards its food or not? Like, we begin to notice what causes fear in humans at different stages of consciousness. It becomes somewhat apparent to us where people are, at least generally, based on the vibes they're giving off, right? We can just sort of sense it. It's not a judgmental thing. It's just a discernment. And so, you don't walk into a forest and try to approach a wild wolf and like try to pet it, probably, right? Like it's kind of like that. Like, there are humans that probably aren't super beneficial for us to like get close to. And the trick is noticing how that makes us feel, and also noticing if we still feel obligated. These types of things. These are coming from unhealthy places. If we feel obligated to try and trust and try and do that type of thing, like you said, Star of Amun-Ra, trusting ourselves is the only real thing that we can trust, honestly, is ourselves and God. Like, trust that we can follow our own advice. Trust that our mistakes are, meant to help us learn, and do the best with what we have. Trust our intuitive senses, but always knowing that, like, this is a process that we're moving through. Like, I'm going to make little errors. I'm going to think that this intuitive thing was real when it was like a trick of the mind. That's going to happen. It happened to me many times. It doesn't happen as much now, but it still does happen. I get caught up in like a story. Luckily, there becomes a feeling associated with the intuition, because the intuition becomes more empowered. So the knowing seems very obvious, whereas the false intuition, or the ego's pretending intuition, which is just pattern recognition, it's cold. It's cold. It's detached. It's cold, is the way I would describe it. It's not a warm openness. It's a cold, rigid type feeling. And there is no other, really, right? To trust. There's no one else to trust. There's no one else here. That sounds weird. It's true. There's only one of us here. You and me are one. So there's no one to trust but me and you and us together. So when humans themselves, as individual little thingies running around, are doing weird things, yeah, I mean, we can't really trust them to do anything until a certain point. At a certain point, you can say, yeah, I mean, this person clearly is a master, so I trust them to do precisely as they say. I trust them to do, if they said to do this, and I might die, if like it looks like I might die and they say to do it, and I trust them enough to just go do it. You know, there's a point we get to with our own presence that we could be trusted to that degree. And we will eventually find people that we can trust like that. There'll be people that are like soul family, really, that just, you know, it builds kind of naturally that way. It means it's a soul family that karmically they're a divine gift. You know, so one of the reasons, for example, that I'll just talk about myself. The reason that I'm so alone, one of the reasons is that I'm not able to receive these gifts right now. Like, I don't notice the connection that people establish with me because I don't feel that it's valuable for me to get too invested in people and what they're doing, and what they're giving, sharing to me, and what I'm receiving. And you know, I'm just sort of like, I'm not closed off. I'm open-hearted. I'm open, but I'm just not invested in it because it's, you know, it's shown to me in my experience that it's just safer, right? And so this is my shadow, my fear here, which is why I'm bringing it up. It feels safer, which is an illusion. That's not true. And this is my fear, right? So when we can notice this, and that's why I'm grateful that I'm doing this, is because, you know, I wasn't really thinking about my own fears about these things. So it's through doing these that I actually like uncover things that I can, I know now that will get all cleared up. I don't even have to effort into anything. It's now that I'm aware of this fear, I know it will clean itself up because I have a discipline in the mind that lets me clean. Once I am aware of the fear, I don't like forget that. I don't forget about my lies of myself to myself, right? So once I notice that I'm lying to myself, then it resolves itself, really. And yeah, Max, okay, we'll talk about the archons and all that stuff. I'll talk about it probably, maybe I'll be able to get to it tomorrow, in fact. There's some really interesting stuff about all of that. Lots of really, really interesting things to dive into, and lots of different takes on it too. So what I'm going to probably try and do is bring a take that is not anchored into any of the things any of the people are saying. Because especially groups of people like, I don't know, the Gnostics or whoever, they tend to like parrot each other, which makes it seem like, oh, this is a generally accepted truth, which makes it seem like it's more valid, but it's not more valid. It's just nonsense that's been repeated. And so a lot of that is the case here. with these types of things, but also there's a truth to it. And we can observe the virus they talk about in the astral, and it looks sort of like a giant dark squid kind of thing. Actually, you know what it looks like? It looks like the mind flare from Stranger Things. That's what it looks like a giant black octopus thing. That's what the virus looks like that we're infected with here, that people tend to refer to as the demiurge. And I'll talk about that. And you know, there's nothing to fear with it. It's not real, but we can get into the types of things it does and how we can like notice if it's influencing us, or you know, it's an interesting little thing that's been put into the consciousness here, and the stories about how it was created are very interesting too. So I'll get into that. So I think that's it for tonight. New place, new stream. Hopefully the audio is okay. I'm gonna listen to this after, and I'll probably hate it because I'm anal about audio. And this room is massive. The ceilings are like, they gotta be like 16 feet or something. I don't know, but it's a giant echo chamber. So thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. I love all your faces, and I hope you can go out and trust yourself enough that you don't need to worry about whether you trust other people or not. You're just there to see what they got to give you. What do you have for me today, person? You know, what gift do you have for me today, child of God? Try to approach it from that optimistic kind of bright attitude. And even, you know, you'll get to a place, even when they offer you like a plate full of shit, you'll be like, oh. It's sort of like when your children bring you like a thing of Play-Doh, and they're like, eat it, and you're like, oh, yum, okay, like, and you pretend to eat it. They've given you nonsense, and you pretend that it's a thing. There's no fault or problem or deception even in pretending to be in the illusion with them a little bit. It's a necessity here to pretend sometimes about that, it seems. I wouldn't know how to navigate life without like pretending quite a lot, right? It's okay to like, just to help them feel comfortable, to just pretend a bit that, yeah, we're separate beings here, totally, bud. Yeah, there's lots of separate things. Oh, and did you know, I wouldn't recommend getting involved in like gossiping about it or like reciprocating, but just pretend to like get it. That's what I do. I just nod, smile and nod. Yeah, I get it. And then if they say something that's a little bit extra ridiculous, I'll usually just correct it. And in fact, I can't help but just, you know, getting all up in their grill anyway, regardless, because it's just exciting to me to expose truth when somebody's told me a lie. I just get excited. I'm like a kid. I don't even care who's saying what. I'm just like, ooh, there's truth I can say. Ooh. That's how I get. So awesome. Thank you, Max. And you're an audio engineer. Yeah, I'm I'm not an audio engineer, but I know a bit about it. A little bit about it. I look forward to doing the next video. Thank you so much for joining, Max. Appreciate you. And also Star of Amun-Ra. That's a really interesting name to look up if you guys are interested in some of our history here. Thank you guys so much. All the blessings in the world, all the glories, all the love, all the peace, all the power. Take care, everyone.